when you write a long, clunky line and then you watch someone try to make it not feel long and clunky, it really sits with you. And really good actors will do it. And or sometimes they'll just be like, "Hey, can I just not say this sentence in the middle?" And you're like, "Yeah, that was an unnecessary sentence." Uh, but I really was passionate about it at the time.
Welcome to Screenwriters Talk Screenwriting with your hosts, Jordan Imiola, Kerstin Porter, and Elena Dizon.
Screenwriters Talk Screenwriting.
Today, we welcome back Alex Franklin and Marc Muszynski. They are writers on Dexter Original Sin and the upcoming Dexter Resurrection, and they were staff writers on Dexter New Blood. Welcome back, Alex and Marc.
Thank you so much for having us back.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
I'm glad we didn't blow it on the first chance, on the first go around. Enough to be asked back.
Definitely not. Again, the part we didn't record, but I was talking about how much we love that episode you guys were on last time.
Thank you. I mean, we had such a blast, so we're just thrilled to be back and to get to see you both and to meet Elena.
Yeah. All right, first question. What have you been up to since we last talked 3 years ago?
The last 3 years, Mark and I have been pretty entrenched in the Dexter universe. We've been really, really lucky.
There was a brief period, actually probably around when we were recording the first, because
Yeah.
Dexter New Blood was just a limited series. And so there was no real intention to do more with it at the time. And so we did have a long period where we were like, oh my God, we had this amazing opportunity to be staff writers on this really cool show, and now we don't have a job again. And it was like, wow, it took us years to get that first job, and now you just get to do it again. This is, I guess, just the prelude to more Dexter, which obviously came back and we are so thrilled. But like in that time, it was actually, although it was terrifying in a like financial sense, it was really cool because we got to write our own stuff. We got to try our hand at developing. We wrote 2 episodes of the animated Netflix series Polly Pocket.
Oh, yeah. there we talked
Oh,
about
cute.
this.
Yeah, you
Doesn't,
can't put us in a box,
Yeah.
Polly Pocket, Dexter.
Just in the pocket.
She does
Oh, I
murder
love
the worst
that.
people in her town, but but and although I'm thrilled that we have jumped back into something that's been running for a while. I'm really grateful for that time in retrospect because it gave us a chance to like stretch ourselves and to appreciate and put to the test all the stuff we'd learned working on Dexter and from the like brilliant executive producers and creators of the show who we got to watch do their thing.
What do you do
It,
as a writer on set?
it really depends on the day. And we were lucky. So we had the two Clyde Phillips, the amazing genius creator and showrunner, and then Scott Reynolds, another guy who is the executive producer, writer, also brilliant and wonderful. And then there was another woman, Mary Leah Sutton. Just as many compliments as I had for the first two, got him for her too. And they were all mainly the point people on set. So when we were there, we we sort of were somewhere in between shadowing and like practice, like play fighting. I don't know. It felt like we got to watch them be, producers on set. And it's a lot of there's just so much going on collaboratively between what the actors are doing, what the director is doing. And then there's so many things that are just like, oh, uh, this house is smaller than it was sort of written to be, so we can't do it like we can't block the scene the way the thing is written. There's all these like little, just the minutia that come up in the heat of a 150 person collaboration. And I think a lot of the job is getting the information, it was knowing what the intention was. And so there's a lot of meetings like before they shoot. There's like a concept meeting, a tone meeting, a production meeting where you're sort of hearing everyone's plans and then especially like the creator's like vision for it. And so if you have the answers, great, give them. And if not, knowing what things and when to run it up the flagpole for the decision makers to decide.
Yeah, being that and providing, so like absorbing that for them, because like a lot of times people are just sort of trying to hold it all in their head and sort of figure out where they're emotionally in the scene. And all of the actors were always like so prepared, like they always knew exactly where they were in the season because we shot in blocks. So there were times like we would film out of order sometimes, but like they were so sharp about knowing where they were. But occasionally there would be need for clarification, like, oh, what am I thinking in this scene? And or where am I going next scene? Because like I need to know where this urgency is coming from. Like, am I hurrying out because I need to get to this thing? Or can I be a little bit more methodical about it? So it was like sort of just helping provide texture when needed. And then again, what Mark said, running things up the flagpole to the people who can actually make the bigger decisions.
Awesome. And then you mentioned something about when they're shooting in blocks. Can you explain for the listeners that don't know what that means? What does that mean when you're shooting in a block?
Yeah, of course. So basically, in the instance of Dexter Original Sin, we had 10 episodes and 5 blocks. So the way that that worked was each block was dedicated to 2 different episodes, and one director would be in charge of that entire block and those 2 episodes. So we would film in sequence, but based on what the production needs were, like if there was something on location in episode 1 and 2, they might film some episode 1 and 2 scenes within the same day, just for the efficiency of production. So, and then so they basically, we would get a production schedule. They'd be like, this is everything that we're doing for the 2 episodes, and these are all the dates. And then basically you would just completely start over in block 2, and it would be like a different director, a different AD, their team, and they'd be like, okay, this is everything that we're going to do for episodes 3 and 4, and this is the schedule. So it's basically just like distilling the schedule in a way that makes sense. Yeah. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah. So I can imagine that it's meant to kind of cut, so you don't have to have the same days of him in a car or something, having a monologue or a montage that's going to be placed in every episode. Probably budget wise, that would probably make sense to have it block shot. Correct?
Yeah. Especially with the driving scene, because we learned those were really hard. There's a driving scene in 3 and 4. Those are both getting shot in the same day.
Oh, great.
As a writer, are you keeping this in mind as you're writing and thinking, okay, maybe I shouldn't do so many driving scenes? I feel like this comes up all the time as a writer, where it's like, think about the production. Don't write something crazy, but you guys have a TV show, so can you write whatever?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think Original Sin was it was so important to have that experience because we were not around for New Blood because it was being shot on the East Coast during COVID. So this was like straight up for our first experience. And the answer to that is yes, I think it is deeply impact our writing going forward because we're realizing how many things need to be practical, or can be practically shot.
I also think even more than the budget concerns, because it's not that it's just to pare those things back, but it's very doable to just it's like, oh, this was a car scene. Now they're standing next to the car before they leave. But I think also watching the actors, like when you write a long clunky line and then you watch someone try to make it not feel long and clunky, it really sits with you. And really good actors will do it, and or sometimes they'll just be like, "Hey, can I just not say this sentence in the middle?" And you're like, "Yeah, that was an unnecessary sentence." But I really was passionate about it at the time.
I know you're at episode 5 of this season. I loved episode 5. It was great. As soon as I watched it and then I saw you wrote it, I was like, I'm contacting Mark to see if he can come back in the podcast.
I mean, I wish we could. I'm really proud of what we did do on that episode, but the room broke all of those stories in pretty great detail. And I think the biggest thing I feel is lucky that we got that episode specifically because it's full of a lot of really cool character moments that many of which were in the minds of Clyde and Scott from like early in the season. And it was sort of like an honor to get I don't know if they thought of it this way, but I felt like it was an honor to get the chance to like bring those things to life. And I know like we love writing the cool murder stuff too, but to get an episode that had some like bigger scenes for Deb emotionally and for Dexter and especially Dexter and Harry and their relationship, we were really excited about it.
Having Harry on the table and him waking up and Dexter there, it was like mind blowing. It was like so like
That
that
was a Scott Reynolds special. He had that in his head from like day one, and him and Clyde sort of built this awesome reasoning behind it. Um, and we knew that it was like cool, but then when we saw it as viewers, we were like, oh, this is epic and iconic. Like they just had such an instinct for what I think like would satiate the fans and ultimately serve these characters because it's like only Dexter would put Harry, his own father, on the table as a way of proving that he's a big boy now and he can handle these bigger responsibilities, and that's just a decade, 2 decades of institutional knowledge from our bosses.
it was done so well. Like it was a cool thing to see, but like it was also justified before, and it was like Dexter's doing this to make sure Harry doesn't make a mistake that's going to go too far. Going back to like the writing, what was the writers' room like? I think you two told me or told us that you wrote New Blood in a Zoom room. Was this all in person, the writing room?
And we were in person for the entirety of Original Sin, which was very cool because we had actually started out in person on New Blood, but then the pandemic happened, so it was like a half and half situation. And being back in the room was really awesome because those bonds just they feel like a little bit stronger. Just being able to like go for a walk and the silly little stuff that comes up in the room that ends up being like the joke pitch that is the coolest, like the big turn in the episode. You discover so much by being together.
How many writers were there total?
10? I think there were 10 on Original Sin.
So if someone was, let's say, some bright-eyed, bushy-tailed writer enters into the Dexter world, and you're introducing him to the departments, because we talk a lot about a writer's room, but what would you say, like, this group does this group does that? Like, we know the 10, you said, writers in the writer's room, but is there like another level, like here's the writer producer type?
Well, every writer's room functions very differently, and that just stems from the showrunner and how they specifically want to do it. So Mark and I both started off as assistants in comedy rooms, so they would divide rooms up on like, okay, this room's gonna break the A story. This room's gonna be the punch up room, and they're gonna punch up all the jokes for the B story. So there were like different ways, like they would break up the writers, and each room would have different functions. The way that this one worked was we were kind of all in it together. We all like from staff writer to EP, we were all in the room together, breaking story together, and the only time that you weren't a part of breaking story was if you were off writing your own episode.
And there are, you had asked sort of like the writers, producers, like that sort of thing. Are, there's like a hierarchy of levels. And I think we were very lucky in that all of the people at the top really set a tone of that like everyone deserves to be listened to and heard, and we want to chase the best ideas we can. That said, the people who had those higher titles had them, at least in our case, because they had a lot of really great experience and really impressive careers. So it was easy and fun for us to watch them work. And even if we weren't being held to like a strict hierarchy per se, you could tell like the respect and reverence that a lot of people had like earned.
Wow, it sounds
Yeah.
like it's the tone when the top has a structure and a method that works for everybody, and that's really awesome to see.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's all of our jobs to feed the showrunner's vision of what they want the show to be. Um, so like there would be, those like deferring moments, like when, somebody who was a little bit more experienced in the room would be like, I think this is a direction that could be really interesting. Like we would follow that thread. And ultimately it was on the people who were like a little closer to the top to be like, okay, I think this is exactly what the showrunners want. Like just like it's all about guiding us towards what the the creator's vision is.
So I'm curious about, you have this whole world that has already been made with Dexter and New Blood and all of that. So how did you figure out the world pre-Dexter? Did you sit down and have lists of all the ways that characters were, and like how did that, and you guys have so many different brains working on it. So what did you do?
Well, our showrunner worked on seasons 1 through 4, and then the other EP wrote on all 8. So there was like a deep knowledge from both of them about what the world was. But in the meantime, we all collectively made sure that we were deeply entrenched in the other seasons too, and constantly going back and rewatching old episodes. Um, the Dexter wiki was amazing because the fans take copious notes. But ultimately, like, it was on us to know as much as we possibly could about who those characters were so we could understand where they were going, with the full backstop that Clyde and Scott know everything. So like if there was ever a question about anything, they'd be like, oh, no, 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 it was this because remember that day when we decided, and then of course this is what ended up happening. Yeah.
I guess that's kind of my question too. You have the ending, and do you work backwards, or do you start and then try to figure out how you're going to get there?
They always
There,
have, oh, sorry, Mark.
no, no, go for it.
They know that Clyde and Scott always know where the season's going to end before we even start the room. So we always know that we're building to the grand idea of what they ultimately want the theme of the season to be about. So it is very helpful having that knowledge because we know what we're writing to, we know what we're pitching into, and it's even more helpful having 8 years of archival footage to know where those characters are going to end up eventually. Like Dexter wasn't always good at being a serial killer, but we know that he had to figure some shit out, so we're like, oh, what is the scene where he figures out that smelling salts is the best way to get them out, get them up.
When the trailer first came out too, like we were so excited by how the cast looked. Like the younger versions of the cast looked just like the cast of the original series. Do you know how the casting worked? How did they get people who look just like the original cast?
They looked really hard, I assume. We didn't get to be super involved in the casting process because we are not important enough. But and because
We
we
had
were
the
working on
best
the indie
cast.
show at the time.
We had the best casting director ever, though, John Papsadera. He does all of Taylor Sheridan's
Mhm.
stuff. Like he is such a veteran that like I don't know. I think
Mhm.
I don't know, the magic of casting directors.
Yeah.
Like
I'd say he's the best ever, tied with Ross Meyerson, who did Dexter Resurrection.
Yeah, because those like the casting directors, I was once a casting assistant in my old life. I worked for this amazing woman. Her name's Sheila Jaffe. Like their knowledge of actors, like and the way that it spans like all mediums. They're like, oh yeah, this person was, I saw them in an off-Broadway show like this time. Like they just know who everybody is. And so when you know who everybody is, you're gonna be like, oh, Christina Milian, she would be an amazing LaGuardia.
She's fantastic, actually. I was so happy to see, like, oh my God, I get to see her, act again. It's and I'm sure she's done stuff since, but I just on Dexter, Christina Milian, yes, my early 2000s, like I love her music because this is one of the first times we see Harry in his point of view because we were so
Mhm.
used to Dexter and his dark passenger dad who's here. And so it took me a minute to see Christian Slater as Harry because I'm like, oh yeah, he's realizing his son is a serial killer and how to deal with it. Should he continue? And just that dynamics of like, when is Dexter going to finally get his approval? And then I was so thrilled that your guys' episode was the factor where he just goes, "You smelling salts, come on." He's just like,
Mhm.
so that like was still. Can you tell us about the character of Harry and how that developed?
I mean, Harry, for I remember Clyde had sent around the pitch for the season, and to to me, and I'm curious, Alex, how you felt, like the fact that we got to see Harry and see that relationship is, to me, is like what makes the show different. Like it's what otherwise it's just Dexter doing the same thing, but he's younger. But because we get to see this force that shaped him, that you all you see in the original season is basically crater that Harry left in Dex. He's like he's either seen in flashback or he's a ghost appearing to him. And to watch that relationship and the sort of like love that he has for his son, that so much love that it leads him to this very let's say unorthodox solution for his son's mental struggles.
Well, and you
That's
also
that's what
understand,
I think.
yeah.
No, go on.
And you're like you understand where the desperation's coming from to keep his son alive because we now have the context that he lost a son prior. So to like Mark's point, providing that context is what makes the show different because now we understand Harry a hell of a lot more. Um, yeah, and again, we have to give all that credit to our bosses because that was something that they were really passionate about um, putting forward, like making a priority.
We can continue really hammering home the theme that most of what being a writer on staff is appreciating your bosses and their contributions. Because I feel like if there's one unifying message we've conveyed so far, and one thing
Yeah.
we want people to remember,
Do you
it's
guys
like,
share appreciation with them in person or do you just do it, behind their back?
Uh, yeah, no, we never tell them.
That's why they brought you back. Okay.
yeah,
They're still waiting for your approval.
yeah.
One of
I
these
know.
days.
Oh my God. No, we are very effusive because it well, so much of that just comes from feeling like very, very lucky, you know? I don't mean to sound cheesy, but it is very exciting. Like when you like find the right shape to what they're looking for. Like it's like all of us like really trying to make our daddies proud, you know? And then and then when it works, we're like, oh my God. And when you realize that it's because of them and because of the environment that they created to make a safe space for those ideas to sort of flourish, like it's hard not to be outwardly thankful.
And when you say outwardly thankful, part of this is I'm terrible with like, you're supposed to give people flowers when they're sad or whatnot. Like, are you just saying it, or are you giving them gifts? Are you sending them Christmas cards and throwing them parties? How do these people love you so much to keep you coming back on Dexter? That's all I want to know.
Well, I do think the one thing, there's so many different forms of writing. And the thing that I really feel like we have understood about this, especially like TV writing on a writing staff, is like you get to do so many cool, fun, creative things, but like ultimately you're sort of like a steward of someone else's baby in a way. And it's like a weird and big responsibility because like if you totally screw it up, you're gonna ruin their week trying to fix it, basically. And I think the pride that we have in working on this is that we've been able to help like bring that vision of theirs into the world. And I hope, and when you have them on the podcast, you can ask them. But I hope that the reason that they're bringing us back is because we've done a good enough job of that, and that they're proud of the end product of what they've made and our contributions to it.
Mhm. Yeah, and then we just bribe them with a lot of gifts here.
It is gifts. Okay, I knew it.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Yeah, right. It's just gifts. It's just gifts. Yeah, it's just thanking them. It's really at the end of the day, it's mostly showing gratitude by just saying thank you or shooting them an email.
And like I think earlier you'd asked about like when we knew about Resurrection, they were running Original Sin and then also getting that set up before any of us even knew about it. So they were like coming up with a pitch, doing all this work that I can't really speak to behind the scenes, like while they were running a whole show, and then they were doing the writing for that show while they were in production for another show.
Are you thinking about audiences who have never seen any of the Dexter series as you write Original Sin?
We did try. Yeah. I think that one of the joys of a prequel is that in theory it should be able to be enjoyed by anyone because none of the stuff that they would have had to see before has happened yet. And so we did think a lot about, I mean, obviously the Dexter fans are a huge part of the show, but I know that when we sat down on day one, Clyde was like, we want this to be a show that anyone can come to and still enjoy. And then, while still giving the core audience what they want.
Awesome. And I told people, like people who haven't seen Dexter, I think most of my friends have seen it, but a couple of people here and there haven't. I'm like, you can start on the Original Sin, the one that's on now.
I also talked to someone who just watched like season 1 of Dexter and then went back and watched Original Sin, and he said that was a great way to do it because it gave you enough context for the character that you then go back and watch Original Sin. But I don't know. I guess I hope that the Dexter verse has infinite entry points.
Mark, was that person my husband?
Is that what he did? I thought
Yeah,
I
that's
thought he got
weird.
further in.
Well, he did, but like he got hooked after season 1, but
No,
yeah,
it was
but he
actually
did.
it was one of my Chicago friends, but I I thought Charlie got further in. Sorry.
Well, oh no, I was just like wondering. I was just like, oh, that sounds familiar to me too. I was like, oh, that's because that's what Charlie did.
Going back to New Blood, was there any advice that Clyde gave you guys that you kind of just carry with you throughout, or anything in particular that's like, what advice did he give you?
Like all of it. I'm trying to think of like one because I feel like he has so many great like both like big strategy. Like he always talks about like starting, he knows the ending and then it's like what is he? It's like putting his nose against the whiteboard and then walking backward. So it's like all kind of expanding in front of him. Um,
I
he
think like
talks about that a lot. Oh, go
one
on.
thing that he's like so brilliant at is like he has like he's such a visually minded person. So he'll have these like beautiful visuals in his head that will like evoke a feeling or like feel like a very interesting turn. So like a lot of the times like if we're feeling maybe stuck on something, like holding on to a visual that we think is like really
Mhm.
exciting and sort of figuring out if there's a way to build around it is sort of a way to get yourself unstuck and
Yeah.
right to a feeling, the feeling that you want in that moment that's being evoked through that visual.
Is that kind of, you talked about Harry being on the table before. Was that a visual that was written around or no?
I think that was more like a moment that was written around.
Ah, okay.
But I think it was a moment that we knew would be visually cool. So nobody was no one was thinking too hard about the specific visual. Uh, the other thing that Clyde said or has said a couple times that I think about all the time is he once said every document is a sales document because so much of getting a TV show to happen is just communicating your vision over and over and over again to and every single person people who need to listen for their job, people who don't want to listen, like everybody. And so it has really transformed the way we write even like outlines or even the script itself. It's like you're getting the person to read this to like buy into this idea and to see it in a way that would be like exciting. And I think that mindset has pushed us in every even like thank you emails or whatever to people or like notes emails to friends like everything you're doing you're trying to like I don't know help make something creative come into the world.
This one's kind of a fun one. Do you have a favorite character or actor in Original Sin?
I I mean I just think like Patty walks on water. Patty Gibson plays Dexter. Especially as the season would go on, there were just like moments where he would just sort of effortlessly embody Michael C. Hall in a way that was like kind of eerie, but didn't feel like an impression. It felt like it was like he was being possessed or something. It was like very, very fascinating. And like to our points about like everything sort of stemming from the top, like Patty was the first person on that call sheet. And he was just also the kindest human being, like maybe that we've ever met. Like it's wild how nice all of the actors were on the show. But I think him sort of setting that precedence made it such a cool environment for everyone. And I like honestly am obsessed with them all. Have a soft spot for uh, Alex Shimizu, who plays Masuka. So
Yeah, he's great. I mean they've all been so great. uh,
yeah,
Molly, love Molly. And to play
Molly plays Deb.
Deb, yeah,
Mhm.
to play Deb, who's a character that isn't necessarily in the crux of like she's not her character isn't involved in all the big murder stuff that's going on, at least not directly. And so she sort of has to like hold down this whole other area of the show, in a way. And it was cool to see her like step into that.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that Dexter still has this like nice boy persona, like a normal person would. Speaking of Deb, were there meetings about exactly how many fucks Deb can say per episode?
You know what? I guess that's the benefit of being a Showtime show, is that. And I feel like that kind of came with the character. For anyone who had watched the original series, I, I think they would have been sad if there weren't enough of them.
Exactly. There had to be. I was every time I watch it, even doesn't matter what episode, I'm just like, there has to be some sort of fuck quota that's happening.
We did have a board in the room. It was like this like tiny little miscellaneous board that if we like thought of a very inappropriate Deb quip, we would like put it on the board and see if there was like space for it. So it would be like, we need a Deb thing right here. And there was one, I don't think it made it through, but I think one that I pitched that I was very proud of was Steve McQueef.
That was in. Yeah.
What did it make it?
I think so.
We got one in. We got one in. But yeah, so it's just like this running board. So if anyone came in here, they would be like, ew, what is all that? Like your period state. Like it was all just like nasty, horrible.
HR must have loved that board.
And see, your sketch and improv came into handy.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of the. Yeah, I guess sketch and improv helped with Steve McQueef. Yes, I will give that.
I mean, a lot of other stuff. I will
give that one to UCB.
But the main thing that was worth all the money, Steve McQueef.
Drama writers are some of like the funniest people in the world. Like it is like so wild. So the way that it like effortlessly like fell out of them so often, and I was like, oh man, I spent like decades trying to be funny, and you just like are. It's amazing.
So is there like a certain reaction when, because in person you guys are fun and you guys are lighthearted. Is there an actual interaction, or what are their reactions when you say, oh, I write for Dexter?
Dexter's the way we cope with all of the joy that we feel, Everyone needs a coping mechanism. No, I don't know, Alex, has anyone they've just been excited, and they quickly skip how I feel about it, and then they have questions about it if they care.
Yeah, it's a lot of like, oh my God, I loved the first 4 seasons. Like that's so cool. It's like to Mark's point. And then you get the few that are just like, I held on to the end and I loved it. And you're like, oh, you're a real one. I did have, so it's like more about how they feel about the show versus how like they see us in the role of writer in that show. I did go to a wedding one time, and a girl that I knew brought a date, and he was a new guy. And she was like, oh, this is Alex. She writes for Dexter. And he was like, I watched that show once. I couldn't bloody stand it. And I was like, oh.
I would have said, I met you once. I couldn't bloody stand you.
Right?
I feel like what I more often get are from people who are like, oh, yeah, I don't know if that show's for me. Because I feel like it's well known enough in a good way. It's like people self-select, and I don't, it's heavy. I feel like even my own parents are like, well, we watched your episodes.
Oh, the nicest parent response. All right. So what are you guys working on now?
We're writing a feature.
Ooh, can you tell us more?
No, because it's so new. But it's, we have TV stuff that we're working on that hopefully we'll get to bring out to the world in the near future. But while that is in progress, yeah, TV is like something
like
that
your own?
Yeah, our original stuff, but it's the development process. I'm butchering this, Alex. Would you like to? I feel like
No, you're doing great.
I'm being very like insecure and like tentative about it. But like we, as TV writers, we have our own TV projects that we are bringing to market, and hopefully producers and eventually studios and networks will sign on. And in the meantime, while we work on that, we also really love movies. And
I
so,
kind of love that you were being timid and shy, by the way. You're not just cocky and like, as somebody who also is timid and shy about her own work, I'm glad you guys aren't above it.
well, and it feels crazy in this climate to be like, yeah, I think we're just gonna go sell our original, not based on any IP or with any A-list people attached TV pilot, and you guys will see it on the air next year.
Yeah, it still feels like sort of a fever dream that we were allowed to write on Dexter. We're like, whoa, oh my God. What did we do in a previous life to get here? Like everything like still feels like such a surprise, and it's so exciting that like sometimes it is hard standing in your power in the way that it's just like, and I am a creator too, like
Yeah.
when every single day you're like, I can't believe I get to do this.
I also want to circle back to last episode we did with you guys. You gave us the advice and advice to new writers to not be perfect. Just put it down, not be perfect. Is there any new advice you want to give us?
Uh, this is gonna sound like so like esoteric and basic. But like for right now, I would say like trust the process because like things that sort of feel impossible, like when you have enough like really smart people around it, or just by the nature of us being humans and us being innately storytellers, because like that's sort of how we experience the world, like with enough time, like things will
Mhm.
shape out. Like
Yeah.
so it's like not panicking when you feel like you've are in a corner, like written yourself into a corner. And I think that's something that Mark and I have also discovered a lot in our own writing outside of the Dexter world.
It's actually a piece of advice that I got from my dentist about tooth cleaning. Uh, she was trying to explain to me how to brush better, which I was like, whatever. I felt like I was doing it great, but she was like, her advice was time over pressure,
Mm,
and the idea is like if you brush softly for longer, you will actually get your teeth cleaner than if you like really try to just do it fast and get it done with, and you could ultimately hurt your teeth that way. And something about that really resonated with me in all these other parts of life that aren't teeth. Uh, Writing being maybe like the biggest of them. It's like it it's really hard to get like you're on a journey with anything you're writing, and you don't always necessarily know where you're going to end up. And if you try to force it to be something, it almost never will. But if you give it time and attention, then you'll get somewhere. And hopefully somewhere you didn't expect, because that's always where like the best stuff comes from.
Sounds like the best writers, they should go to their dentists and get their teeth
Yes.
cleaned.
Yes. I think that's the real advice.
mhm.
Yes, that's pretty much it. But I am curious if you guys had any mentors growing up that carried with you throughout your lives.
Hmm.
Any memories? Any special people in your life?
I never
Um,
had, with the exception of Clyde, who's like become our amazing mentor for the last 5 years. I never had like a consistent mentor growing up, but I had one teacher. She was an English teacher And at the time, like this was my sophomore year in high school, I was a little bit more timid. And she was like, your writing voice is really, really strong. And I think you need to follow that instinct. And having that reflected back to me, like in a way that it was coming from an adult, and because she seemed so confident in it, it made me feel confident. So like I really hold on to that memory, um, even though like I haven't seen her in 20 years, but that was such a turning point for me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, growing up, my one of my best friend's fathers was a science fiction author, and he wrote like mostly short stories, and and he was always so like supportive and encouraging, but also would tell me that things were actively bad, which as like an eighth grader who was just like, yeah, I like wrote a story. He's like, yeah, okay, great try, man. Here's a bunch of notes on it. And I don't know how he managed to be both supportive and also honest, but I really appreciated him for that. Um, and also, he's like a great writer, and it was just cool to know someone that was a writer that got published in things and made it seem like a real job.
That's awesome.
well. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark and Alex. You can watch Dexter Original Sin on Paramount Plus and Showtime, and we appreciate your time so much. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
guys. This
you.
was so much fun. I love talking to you guys.
Yeah, thank you so
Likewise.
much for having us back.
Thanks for listening to Screenwriters Talk Screenwriting. Subscribe, rate, and review for more episodes.
You can now follow Screenwriters Talk Screenwriting on YouTube and Instagram at Screenwriters Talk Screenwriting. Now, here's the joke of the podcast.
So we got one last question, but we know you have a background in comedy, both of you. Do you have a favorite joke?
I do. It's it's one. So when I used to go fishing with my dad when I was younger, there would be like a 7 hour drive to get to wherever we were going sometimes, or like we do a lot of like cross country skiing and stuff like that. And so we'd always just like pull up lists of old timey jokes, or among other things to pass the time. And the one that always stuck with me was, I want to leave this world the way my father did, quietly and in my sleep, not screaming and terrified like his passengers.
That sounds like Dexter humor.